Yo guys, what's going on? Lucky Cheese 7 is back again to give you guys Chainsaw Man Part 2 live stream discussion. Oh my god. Let me just start off by saying that I am so sorry for all the Chainsaw Man fans that have been waiting for me to talk about Chainsaw Man practically since Part 2 started. I mean, I was there when Part 2 dropped, and then after Chapter 101, I didn't exactly say, "No, the series not that important, I won't talk about it." It wasn't that necessarily, because I did read the manga week to week. Like, even after Chapter 101 came out, I still read the chapters. It was just a matter of, like, alright, finding the time and opportunity to talk about that, and then I had to, like, just limit on what series I wanted to talk about. And I mentioned this before time and time again through, through my One Piece streams, through my Eden Zero streams, and there has just been a lot on my end that's been happening. And I feel like with this week being a brief week from my end of things on work, I think, okay, I can come back and talk about the things I've been meaning to talk about for months now. And Chainsaw Man is definitely one of those. Although, in the case of Chainsaw Man, it's been like a year. So that's That's one thing to say. But on one hand, it is one of those things where it's like, yo, Lucky, you missed out on a year's worth of content for Chainsaw Man Part 2. Like, there a lot of stuff's been happening. And yeah, that can be said. A lot of stuff has been happening with Chainsaw Man Part 2. But on the other hand, though, the more I think about it, it's only been like, what, three arcs? What do you think? Justice Devil arc, Dating Denji arc, Falling Devil arc, and this current arc right now. So it's only been like four arcs. And I was there briefly for the beginning of the Justice Devil arc, which it's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating to see where part two started. Because everyone, myself included, thought, okay, we're gonna start part two, we're gonna see Denji again. And interestingly enough, Fujimoto did not take that approach. He took the approach of introducing us with a new protagonist through Asa Mitaka, which I know has been a little varied in the fan base. A lot of people either like her, or a lot of people are kind of just like, I'm not really feeling her. Like, that's the direction of where the fan base is at. You either rock with Asa Mitaka, or you're kind of just like, bro, she's not that interesting. She's dull. Like, she's not that great. And I personally, I like Asa Mitaka. I like where she's going, and like realistically, if you look at where her first chapter introduction was, it's very similar to Denji's first chapter, where you kind of see how shitty both of their lives are, and then you kind of see with what leads them into becoming who they are. Like, the first chapter is more of like an origin on how Denji became the Chainsaw Man, and well, more of a starting ground, if you will. And very similarly with Asami Taga, the first chapter for her in part two, chapter 98, is essentially how she became the War Devil, with Yoru. And it's something I actually really, really find fascinating, that you introduce us with the new protagonist in part two, but it's not like you're completely like letting go of Denji. Denji still has a pretty big part throughout part two, and it's actually interesting looking back on how part two started off, because if you look at it, especially through the volumes, like, you don't get Denji again until I want to say chapter 102. Yeah, so chapter 102 is when you get Denji. Or I should say that's when you get Chainsaw Man. That's when you get like the Chainsaw Devil appearance. But then chapter 103 is like the proper introduction to Denji. It's like when you properly see him in part two. But the thing I noticed with what Fujimoto did in the Justice Devil arc is that Denji only had small little appearances like here and there. Like, he would still be in the story for the first arc, but it would just be like in like waves. Like, you would have a small little snippet of Denji in, like, say, chapter 104. You had him there, and then he shows up briefly, like, towards the end of the fight against the Justice Devil. You see him show up there and saving Asa. So you had him show up, like, again, in, like, these small little chunks here and there throughout the first arc of part 2, coming in to save the day. I mean, and it's actually funny when you think about that because his first appearance, if we're not counting, like, Denji's human side, we're talking about, like, just him as the Chainsaw Man. Like, he saved Asa 3 times. He saved her against the Bat Devil. He saved her against the Justice Devil. And he saved her against the Falling Devil. The only time Denji didn't save Asa, and that's the clock in the background that's just going off. It likes to go off every hour, so I'm gonna make sure to keep the stream not too long. But the only time Denji didn't save Asa was during the date arc, or as I like to call it, the aquarium arc. The whole dating Denji arc by itself is the only time Denji didn't save her. That was the one occasion where Asa actually took on the Eternity Devil and won. So so far as the arcs go, that's the only arc where Asa's had like a huge W. Every other arc, it's been like she has her own feat, if you will, like trying to stand up against the devils that she's fighting. But Denji's been the one that's been kind of been like the hero who comes in to save the day. I mean, for crying out loud, it is called Chainsaw Man at the end of the day. So it is one of those situations. But the thing I've noticed with part two is that we do hit similar beats to part one, but how they're handled is differently. Like, let's take the Bad Devil, for example. When we get reintroduced into the Bat Devil in part two, it's a different Bat Devil for sure. But the big difference here is that you have Asa and Yuko that are dealing with the Bat Devil. And the big similarity between the two of them is that Denji's the one that gets the final blow. Like Denji takes out the Bat Devil in part one, and he's the one who kind of takes out the Bat Devil again in part two. Though the difference comes also from the aftermath too, because shortly afterwards you do have another devil that you deal with. Denji deals with the Bat Devil, and then in part one, it was Aki who actually finished off the second devil of the. I wish I remembered the name. Um, shoot, let me actually look at the look up the Bat Devil arc again because that to me kind of had me thinking. So let's look back at chapter like what was this chapter 10 of the original? The Leech Devil, yeah. So you had Denji take on the Bat Devil, and he did beat the Bat Devil. But then he had to deal with the Leech Devil, which again, similar cues. You had actually did Asa even take out the Bat Devil in part two? I don't know. Shit. So again, you had like a little bit of an occurrence in part two where Bat Devil, Bat Devil, Denji takes out the Bat Devil, Denji takes out the Bat Devil. But ultimately in part two, uh let's see here. Part two. And interestingly enough, you have a situation where Denji saves a cat. Similarly, right? Very, very similar in that sense. Let's see, as we see that. Against the Typhoon Devil. Da, 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 da. Cockroach. Yeah, so Yeah, because you have two devils. You have the Leech Devil in part one, shortly after the encounter against the Bad Devil, and very similar in part two. You have the Bad Devil, and then you have the Cockroach Devil. Yeah, I think that's what it's called, right? Yeah. So yeah, like if we're looking at it through that standpoint, yeah, similar situations. Bat Devil and a cat, rightfully so. Um, the big thing about the Justice Devil arc, though, is again that is, and arguably you could say the Aquarium date arc is also Asa-centric too, in that you have the Justice Devil arc be so focused on Asa and her friendship with Yuko, which again is kind of great because you see how Asa's lifestyle was like early on, and then you kind of see where it leads her with her friendship with Yuko. And with where that goes, you kind of get to find that okay, she formed a contract with the devil known as the Justice Devil, which has kind of been an occurring thing because the Justice Devil showed up again in chapter one of part two, and then it showed up again with Yuko as the host, and it's showing up again recently. So the Justice Devil has kind of been a reoccurring like devil throughout part two. Kind of makes me wonder. It kind of makes me wonder with what Fujimoto is planning on that front. But you see the friendship that Asa and Yuko develop, and that it's one of those things. It's kind of see, I'm fumbling on my words here, but essentially, Yuko tells Asa that hey, I found this place I got to stay at, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to see you again, but like I gotta dip after all the shit that I caused. And right when that arc ends, that's when you get this shadowy figure that's very reminiscent of Chainsaw Man. And she's like, Chainsaw Man? And like, basically, Yuko gets decapitated and is like, dead. And that's kind of how the arc ends. Like, okay. Also, forgot to mention we got a reintroduction of Yoshida, which Yoshida is a big wild card. I do want to say that Yoshida, thus far in part two, is a huge wild card because you just don't know where the guy stands. It's like, is he on our side or is he doing something else? Like, he's with public safety. And given the events of part one, like, we know how public safety operates. We know that. Like, they have some stuff in the background. Granted, it was under Makima's influence because she was the control devil. And obviously, given that, it is nuts. Let me just say that it is nuts. Just thinking about that. But we get slow reintroduction to characters. Like we had a slow reintroduction to Denji for the first volume of part two. Like he doesn't show up in that until like the very end. And very similarly, with the date arc, that's when you get Denji not exactly front and center of the story, but that is kind of where he is like the most appeared in because we're still following through Asa, but we're seeing with what Denji's kind of been doing, what he's kind of been up to, and you're seeing like these little nuggets here and there of like him like developing as a character. Like, he's saving up money to, for tuition for Nayuta to lead a good life, to not essentially lead the life that he had all throughout part one, and you get this moment where she's kind of connecting with Denji too on her side of things, which I think is really touching on that front. And in all honesty, the date arc I would say is probably my favorite arc in part two because it doesn't just end off with the aquarium. Basically, what happens is that Asa more so Yoru, who's the War Devil, by the way, um, turns the stadium. I said stadium turns the aquarium like into a spear, but in doing so, we come to find out that they're kind of stuck in a eternal maze, if you will. Like they're like stuck for a long period of time. Like there's like no way out for them. Which, given part one again, who do they take on again after they take care of the bad devil? They take care of the eternity devil. So it's interesting that you have the bad devil kind of be who Asa takes on shortly after becoming, you know, the war devil. And then after that, okay, well, yeah, technically she does take on Yuko, but outside of Yuko, like, it's like you get the bad devil, and then you get the eternity devil. And I'm kind of sitting here going like okay, I see the direction of where Fujimoto's going. Like he's going in a direction of Sui Ishida. You know, the guy behind Tokyo Ghoul. Like, if y'all remember Tokyo Ghoul, and you see how Ishida handled like Tokyo Ghoul, and then going into Tokyo Ghoul Re with part two, like you notice that okay, we're kind of not exactly playing the same beats. Like we're kind of cherry picking like elements of part one, and we're kind of telling the story in a different form, a different fashion, if you will. And that's kind of what Fujimoto's doing here in Chainsaw Man Part Two, is that we're taking little aspects of what we encountered in Part One, but we're kind of doing it in a new spin. And I think it's actually really cool that we're seeing him take that direction with Part Two. And interestingly enough, again, Part One, Denji took care of the Eternity Devil. Part Two, Denji's not the one who takes out the Eternity Devil, like I said. It's Asa. Asa's the one. This is where she gets her first big W, is the Eternity Devil. And I remember when she took on the Eternity Devil, I was like, dude, yo, Asa's a beast. She's cool. She's awesome. And granted, like I was already on board with Asa, from her introduction with her backstory and everything. Like Homegirl, man. Like if there's one thing Fujimoto knows how to do, is to make you feel for a character like at their lowest point and just see them like succeed. Because we saw that with Denji in part one. And I mean, granted, we're still gonna see him here in part two. But it's again, it's interesting because likewise, Asa, you see with where her life was going, see her hit her down low, and then, in comes, the war devil. Much like in part one, here comes Pochita, like giving Denji the motivation to like keep living on. It's also kind of fascinating too that Asa, you know, kind of wished for a dream to have a boyfriend, right? In a very similar sense that in a very similar sense that Denji also kind of wanted to date a girl. So it's like kind of playing out the same archetype, if you will, but just taking it in a very different stance. Obviously, Asa's not into the whole, oh yeah, let's like, get it on. That's Denji's whole motif. That's still a thing too with them, but which I know has gotten a lot of people thinking like, yo, has Denji even developed as a character? Like what's Fujimoto doing? It's like he led us to think he's been developing, and then he's throwing these little moments that people are like, oh, it's like here we go again, sleazeball Denji, not thinking about anything but you know his extension cord. Keeping a PG here, thinking about his extension cord, thinking about a girl, and just like just hitting the sheets. I know the whole meltdown that happened with that chapter, and I get it, I do, but it's You ever hear the term addiction? Um, that's kind of what I feel like Denji has. Like, yeah, it's an addiction problem with where like you do better, and then there's like that one little niche that kind of makes you go like, damn, it's like I'm doing better as a person, but there's this one thing, this one little thing, and it like turns everything upside down. And you kind of see that with Denji, where like his whole ordeal with like trying to get it on is kind of like his addiction problem, if you will. But at the same time, again, you see with where his life is currently. Like if you look past like his whole ordeal about like trying to like, live life to the fullest, like trying to, have, you know, it if you will, then you can kind of see like these little hints of like growth in Denji as a character. Like his whole relationship with Nayuta. I thought that was actually really, really cool. Granted, I will say I was a little freaked out at first when Nayuta first showed up in part two because shoot, like when Yoru came in and said, like kissed Denji to a point where like, all right, I'm gonna like try to take control. But needless to say, Asa, but needless to say, Nayuta shows up and she's like thief. And when I saw the end of that chapter, at first I was like, shh. I was like, oh my god, it's been a while since we've seen Nayuta at the end of part one. So where does she stand? And interestingly enough, like she's just very protective of her brother. Like that is essentially what Nayuka's doing. She's like, no, she spit on my property. And I like where Denji is with this because he's like, look, I'm not anyone's property. Like I've been through this shit in part one. I'm my own man. I just have an addiction problem. That's essentially what happened. He's like, look, Nayuta, look, my own desires aside, you come first. And that is a huge, huge stepping stone for Denji. I want to say that right now. Like, his care for Nayuta matters more to him than, you know, his own personal desires. And I think that's very heartfelt. That's a very heartfelt moment for Denji, but it also shows like his growth as a character. Like, if we're talking early part one Denji, I don't think early part one Denji would have like cared that. Like early part one would have been like, "Yo, look, I'm living the life. I'm like having like the best time imaginable. I'm here. I see these girls. I'm like, yo, when are we gonna do the thing?" Part two, Denji, again, like he does still have those tendencies. I'm not gonna say he doesn't, but you do see when shit goes down with Naruto, like he will like put his shit to the side, like, yeah, no, look, like above all else, you come first, and I think that's like really enduring because the whole ordeal when Yoshida like took Denji captive and he was like threatening him with Naruto, he's like, oh, don't you even start. Granted, yeah, okay, it did hit one of those aspects too where what you call it, shit. I'm like fumbling right now. Sorry. Uh, football team lost yesterday, so I'm still kind of sitting here going like, what the hell happened to you guys yesterday? But no, let's see. You just try and do this to them. Send us home right away. Go to hell. Fighting people. Like basically, Yoshida's just trying to tell him like, hey, look. In my opinion, like, don't turn in the chains on me. And of course, Denji's not liking that. Like, he doesn't wanna do that because, like, he likes the fame, he likes the attention, but Yoshida does mention that, "Look, if you don't do this, like, we'll take measures into our own hands, and we will deal with Nayuta," to which it's like I said, like, you see where Denji's at, and you see, like, he's at this confliction road. Because Yoshida says, "Simply stop transforming and that dream comes true with Nayuta at your side. This is your chance to be human again, Denji. You'll go to school the same as always. I can even hang out with you as a friend. You'll go home to those you love, Nayuta and the dogs. Live as a human, Denji. You'll be happy enough even without being Chainsaw Man, won't you?" And again, this is where you see a confliction in Denji. Because he wants the fame, he wants the attention, but he also knows that I've got this little girl I gotta take care of. Like, I can't just push her off to the side. And he does say right here, like, "Look, I don't want anything bad to happen to Nayuta either." But, he also doesn't want to stop being Chainsaw Man. Like, it's one of those things where, again, it's a very superhero trope, if you will, where, I want to protect the people I love. I want to be there for them. But I also don't want to stop being, you know, a hero. And that is how people are viewing Chainsaw Man. Like, people are viewing Chainsaw Man as like the hero. Again, fascinating approach, but it goes to show you, like, with what Yoshida's doing, he's like, "Hey, so you have two choices: Nayuta's life or your greedy desires." And Denji's like, "Yeah, no, I'm picking two. I'm picking two choices." And Yoshida's, "No, you're picking one." And like, this is one of the first times I actually do see Yoshida, like, actually told him, like, "Hey, like, don't you care if Nayuta dies? Like, protesters assemble, kill this guy for me." And Yoshida's like, "He's even dumber than I thought." Denji, and you see Nayuta in the crowd. He's like, "Nayuta, you stink." Basically, he gets this nice little reading between brother and sister, which I like. Like, that to me, like, really hits in the heartstrings, if you will. But the thing is that, and again, that's only like chapter 133. I don't want to delve so much into the next arc, if you will, because it's still ongoing. But needless to say, the next arc is really, really simple. Because, actually, before I get to the next arc, let me talk about this. So, the Falling Devil arc, in my opinion, so far, I'm going to say so far, it's probably the weakest arc in part two. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the worst arc in part two. Like, okay, not worst. That doesn't necessarily mean it's absolute shit. I'm not saying that. Like, if I were to rank these arcs, like the three completed arcs so far. So we have the Justice Devil arc, we have the Dating Denji arc, and then you have the Falling Devil arc. And personally, I would say, and I think I mentioned this earlier, the Dating Denji arc for me is like at the very top. The Justice Devil arc is it's number two. But to be fair, they're both like neck and neck. They're both really great. They're like not even great. Like, they're like amazing, borderline pure perfection arcs. Like, that's how good the first two arcs are apart. Dude, like, yo, those are like really great arcs. Because again, Justice Devil arc, yeah, Denji's kind of in it, but it's more so on Asa Mitaka. Whereas, the dating arc, like, it's still through Asa Mitaka, but you're seeing through Denji's eyes, if you will. You're seeing through her lens of what Denji's kind of been up to, which I think is actually really, really cool. So that's kind of where I stand on those two arcs. And also, you've got this whole ordeal with Fami, the famine devil. And something I didn't actually note is how each of like the devils are kind of the main ones. They kind of reminisce of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. You have famine, which represents hunger. What would control? Let me see real quick. Like if I remember correctly, let's say so you have conquest, war, famine, death. So we already have three of them right now. We have famine, who is Fami. Fami is the famine devil. And then you've got the war devil, which is Yoru, who resides in Asa Mitaka. Then you have conquest, which in the world of Chainsaw Man, I would assume that's basically control. And currently that's Nayuta. So we already have three of the four horsemen devil, if you will. Death is still nowhere to be seen, which I know when the Falling Devil first showed up, a lot of people thought, yo, is that the fourth one? Like, is the Falling Devil essentially death? I know that wasn't exactly the case. But the reason why I say the the Falling Devil arc, for the most part, is essentially, like the weakest arc. Again, not meaning that it's shit. I'm just saying it's weak in terms of like what it offers for like the story. Because for the most part, the arc is like a big getaway arc. It's basically also like trying to get away. And again, very similar to say the Justice Devil arc, where Asa got saved twice by Denji. She, in a sense, kind of gets saved by Denji again here, in you know, in this arc. Granted, it is through Denji as the Chainsaw Man. So the interesting thing here is that Denji doesn't know Asa Mitaka is the War Devil, much like how Asa doesn't know that Denji is the Chainsaw Devil. I think they both kind of have feelings for each other. I think that's a really interesting approach to it. It's like, okay, like there is some semblance of romance here that you can see happening, but it's like they both have their own secret identities, if you will, and how they kind of approach it. It's like, okay, so that's one thing to say, but the arc itself, again, there's not. I wouldn't say there's a lot going for it. It's just that for the most part, the arc's just a big getaway arc. That's really what it is. Whereas again, for the Just Devil arc and the Dating Denji arc, you had a little bit more substance to it as to what's actually taking place in said arc. You know, like the big takeaways I will say you do get from the Falling Devil arc comes from outside of Denji and outside of Asa. Like the only big thing you get for Denji in the Falling Devil arc is this brief little flash of Aki and power, which Fujimoto knows how to hit the heartstrings with that. And then for Asa, it was through shoot, what was her name? Yuko. Yuko, I think isn't that also where you get the flashback too of like her past? Okay, no, maybe I'm like maybe I'm judging that arc too harshly. But personally, like I said, weakest in me, and again means just for those first three arcs. But I will say, as a whole, the Falling Devil arc is, you know, it's a great arc. It's just when you compare it to the Just Devil and Dating Denji arc, it is a little like below that. And really, the only great parts in that arc comes from the stuff outside of that. Like you get the conversation between Yoshida and Fami, which is like, whoa, hold up, like, bro, Fujimoto, what are you setting up here? And then the very end of that arc where you have Fami talking to Nayuta, and man, like it's crazy. It is like really, really crazy. So in a sense, it kind of shows you that like both not only Asa and Denji, but Denji and Nayuta, like they're both kind of keeping their secrets from one another. Like as close as they like to show themselves to be, there is that side of them where it's like, well, they're also kind of keeping secrets too, which I'm gonna be a little curious about where that goes. But you do kind of see that for Nayuta, she does care for Denji. Like in that moment. Well, let me see what chapter would that be. That'd be chapter 331, right? Yeah, let me see here real quick. Because you get that arc, that chapter. You had Fami talking about like, well, how'd you make the devil barf up control? And she just said, like, yeah, I control the devil's brain and a teensy bit, make the humans taste like literal crap. And she does ask, like, hey, why are you after Denji and this girl? Or Asa to Fami. And Fami reveals one thing. She says, look, Nostradamus' prophecy is coming true. The ultimate terror will soon descend upon this world. And if that happens, the age of humans will end. And at first, Nayuta's kind of like, oh, I like the sound of that. Sounds fun. Ushering in an age of devils. But Fami says, I don't want that. She's like, why not? If an age of devils comes, things like pizza and Chinese food will cease to exist. And automatically, like, this is where Nayuta says, what? No more pizza? No, no way. It's like, I know. It's the worst scenario imaginable. At this rate, neither I nor you nor Chainsaw Man will be able to stop the prophecy. But War Devil could be made to win, is what Nayuta's thinking. But then Fami says possibly. She's like, well, what gives? You just tried to kill her. And she says, my intention was only to starve War in that devil's body. I can turn the starved into my pawns. Work with me, Control. With our strength combined, the age of devils may not arrive. And I love Nayuta because right over here she says, no, no way. Well, why not? Because I have school. And this is great because you get this little panel here with Nayuta in school. She's like, hey, raise your hand if you know the answer. She's like, me. Like, hey, pick me. I know. So that's that. And the current arc so far with Chainsaw Man, which has been which has revolved around the church. It's fascinating because you get a little bit of a role reversal. Whereas now it seems like all the attention that Chainsaw Man was getting is now shifting to Asa. And now Denji's the one that's kind of like in like the dust again. And actually, now that I think about it, I don't think we've seen Asa since. Shoot, let me look real quick. Because what are we on right now? Chapter 144? 145 doesn't come out until tomorrow. Let me see. So you get that. Yeah, so since chapter 135. Oh, I also forgot to mention that 135 is also where we kind of get the revelation of there being not one Chainsaw Man, but two. So you have the red Chainsaw Man, the one who is essentially Denji. But there is also a black Chainsaw Man. And that's what Fami reveals. There's a black one. Because Fami reveals that there's a Chainsaw Man that saved Asa. And then there's the Chainsaw Man that Yoru wants to fight. And she reveals that the one that Yoru wants to fight is the Black Chainsaw Man. She's like, "Wait, what?" And she says, "Look, Black Chainsaw Man and Red Chainsaw Man are not the same person. I'm not surprised. You didn't realize, since we sisters have no interest in human or devils." And Yoru was like, "If you want to fight Black Chainsaw Man, like family reveals this, you'll need to turn Red Chainsaw Man back into an ordinary human. The Chainsaw Man that Asa wants to save, and the Chainsaw Man that Yoru wants to kill, are two different beings. Join the Chainsaw Man shirts and you can help each other." So it's essentially being set up in a sense, in a way that both Asa and Denji are like being like taken into the church, which is also kind of where we get introduced to Fumiko, and Fumiko is she's weird. Let me just say that Fumiko is weird. She is a weird character. She's interesting in her own sense because Denji's her senpai, and she's working with public safety, which Denji's kind of like, because at first we get introduced to Fumiko believing that she has the hots for Denji, and she kind of takes things, messing with Denji's extension cord, and it's like I mentioned before, Denji kind of has that addiction problem, if you will, where if he's feeling a certain way, he will go down that path. And that is again where the frustration led with the fan base. I was kind of just like, it's like, come on, bro. We thought you were developing. What are you doing, man? Like, what's going on? But and I do like that Fujimoto you know, kind of did a meta reference there with Denji. It's like, yeah, I know I've had the stuff going on, but like, look, I'm not gonna do this. And little does he know, like, yeah, he's messing around with the testicle devil. Like, look, got it? Like, have some respect for yourself. But then, you know, IRL Denji just goes for it. And again, this is kind of where you do kind of get the Fujimoto wackiness, if you will, with Fumiko. Like, she's like singing and shit. It's actually really, really funny because like this is kind of where you have Denji taking on like controlled like people, if you will. Like while Fumiko's singing, and I thought that was actually really, really funny in, in more ways than one. But you got that. Seems like even Denji for a moment was kind of just going like, "Yo, are you like setting me up? Like, what is going on here?" But we come to find out that no, like Fumiko just loves singing. She don't want to be interrupted, and it just so coincidentally happened that way. You know, but also again, like I mentioned, it's an addiction problem. Denji really thought, "Yo, this girl's into me. Maybe we can have some fun." But then it's revealed, she's with public safety, which is kind of where he goes like, "Oh, man, not this shit again." Like that is the approach you see Denji take. And it's actually funny because after that specific point, that's where we do get the revelation of Asa being put in the position of being recognized as a hero. And you have this exchange between her and Yoru. She's like, we're doing it to save Chainsaw Man. And if we do, we get to kill Chainsaw Man. Still maddening to think that Chainsaw Man also experienced this rush. But the big difference here is that, like, while Asa is getting that fame and recognition, she's not exactly up for it, which is the complete opposite of Denji. Denji is enjoying the thing, but Asa's like, yeah, I don't exactly know how I'll feel about this. Like that is her approach. He's like, nah, girl, I don't know. Like something about this just feels odd. Like an invasion of privacy to her. And of course, that gets her thinking about her parents. And very similarly to, like, say, the first chapter of part two, when you had Asa looking at the poster of Chainsaw Man, you have Denji looking over at a wall with Asa on the poster. And it says Chainsaw Man Church membership. Join the Chainsaw Man Church, support Chainsaw Man, and Asa as a Chainsaw Man member. Or Chainsaw Man Church member. It takes you off, doesn't it? How they're putting Chainsaw Man side by side with some fresh faced nobody. And it's also kind of where we get the introduction of Sword Man. But basically, what I can say so far about the current arc that we're in, um, which I'm assuming is going to be called the Chainsaw Man Church arc, because that's kind of what the focus is. But most of it has just been about recruiting Denji to joining the church, if you will. Which, again, through certain things that Denji does like, he goes along with it. But he does also recognize that, hey, look, I was a tool, you know? And he will, sign up for the church, if you will. But given that, let's see here, we do get the Chainsaw Man Church, interestingly enough. Um, and this is actually where we get the name finally. Like, a lot of people thought that this dude that we saw was like Cole Benny's brother, which I was like, okay, he kind of has the same vibe as Cole Benny. Even kind of has like similar hairpins, if you will. But I was like, part of me wanted to know, like, what is this guy's name? Like, sure, he can be Kobeni's brother, but what's the name? And then we get the name. And his name is Nobana. Uh Higashiyama. So Bro Benny, or in this case, Nobana. So Nobana is the name in first and foremost. I mean, look, the nervousness and everything, like, it's the same antics, if you will. So we see where he gets that side. He gets it from his sister, which part of me wonders what Kobeni's been up to. Like I'm realizing that right now. Like how far deep are we into part two? Like we're only what, like 144 chapters? Like as in total we're 144 chapters, but as in terms of part two, like let me think. So part two or part one ended with what, chapter 97. So let me think here. So if we're at chapter 144, so from yeah, no, it's been like four. Yeah, so it's been like almost like 40. Not even almost. It's been exactly 47 chapters. Where's Kobeni? Which again, as we've been going through part two, like we've been like slowly reintroducing characters. I mean, again, through Asa, we got the reintroduction of Yoshida. That slowly led to the reintroduction of the Bad Devil, which led to Denji reappearing. Um, then slowly from after that, we got Nayuta showing back up, and actually, I want to say like just recently we got reintroduced to who was it? Um, we got reintroduced to somebody. think it's Konakshi, right? Is that how you say her name? Let me go back and check. She like she was a really cool character, and like I felt bad for like misremembering names, but let us go back and look. Um, Quan Chi. There we go. Yeah, so yeah, we got reintroduced to Quan Chi in chapter 142. No, my bad, not 142, 143. So yeah, like we're slowly like getting reintroduced to like a lot of characters. Like shoot, even right now in chapter 144, we got reintroduced to Katana Man. Katana Man's here, which fascinating. It is super fascinating actually that we're getting reintroduced to him. And I kind of have to wonder actually no, I not even have to wonder because we kind of get an essence of what he's been up to, Katana Man. And that, he's delivering justice for Chainsaw Man. And that now he's fighting for public safety, which is again fascinating. It's really fascinating to see that because when you see with where Katana Man was end of part one, not even end of part one, but like when he was introduced in part one, and you see with where he's standing right now in part two, it's like, bro, what you doing? Like, what is going on with Katana Man? You know? I mean, it's cool. Don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it kind of gets you thinking, bro, what is your role? Yeah, because like again, think about it like this: the man showed up, took on Denji, and then right now in this current arc in part two, which I'm gonna call it the Chainsaw Man Church arc, like he reappears and he's a member of public safety, which does lead me to believe one thing. With all these reintroduction, you know who I think we're getting next? Reze. I think without a doubt, because like, we got Quan Chi in the last chapter, we got Katana Man in this chapter. Reze is gonna pop up again soon. Like I have that huge feeling in my chest. Like she is coming back. Reze is gonna make a reappearance, and it's gonna it's something a lot of people have been anticipating with part two for a very very long time, and with what happens, like it is gonna be crazy to say the very least. But actually, let's take a look here. So this chapter and the chapter prior, 142, 143. When do they take place? So they take place before. Okay. Um. Hmm. Yeah. So the interesting thing here with so yeah, no, like the interesting thing here with 143. 143 and 144 are actually the two chapters that we have not seen Denji. So I think with 145, we're probably gonna see Denji. I feel like we're going to. And what we get is gonna it should be fascinating. And I say should because again, Katana Man's here. He's a member of public safety, and it kind of gets you wondering, like, what exactly does Fujimoto have in store for us? Because we have the prophecy of Nostradamus seeming like it's coming to fruition, and number two, The Death Devil has to be popping in here shortly, right? Has to. Like, I'm only saying this because Fami, the Famine Devil, obviously, Nayuta the Control Devil, Yoru, or in this case, Asa Mitaka, who embodies Yoru, the War Devil. And the only one that's missing is Death. So, which I probably have to say this. I think when Death gets introduced, it's gonna be like the game changer of part two. I feel like 100%. Death is gonna be the one that changes the scope of where part two is gonna go. Very similarly, let's say this. You look at part one of Chainsaw Man. Like, what changed the course of part one? And a lot of people could argue it was Reze. Well, the second Reze got introduced, like Reze changed arguably a lot. It was Reze that changed the trajectory of where part one went. And that led us to say the International Assassins arc. And then we got the Gun Devil arc, you know? The Gun Devil arc by itself was like another stepping stone in part one. It was like that by itself changed so much. So I definitely do feel like with this current arc, the the Chainsaw Man Church arc, if you will, or whatever this arc's gonna be called, I do feel it's gonna be a game changer of sorts by itself too. Whatever we get here is gonna lead into where we go with the following arc, which I do believe will either reintroduce one of two characters, Reze or Kobeni, or we're gonna get a little breadcrumb of what's going on with Death. Because again, Death so far is the only devil we have not seen yet from the four, you know, the four horsemen. So, and they're the only ones left. Three out of the four are already here. So, makes you curious. Makes you very, very curious of where we're gonna go with the rest of part two. What the church exactly has in mind for Denji and Asa. And again, just by itself, what Fujimoto has in store for us altogether. But I think for the most part two so far, I'm giving it amazing plus. Like there have been chapters that have been like god tier, like pure perfection, and some chapters that are kind of been like, they're like been on the great plus scale. Like the lowest I could say some chapters have probably gotten from me are like maybe like good plus, but that's the lowest. There have been no chapters where I'm like what's going on? Like I haven't had chapters like that. I've had chapters where I'm like, okay, like they're good, but it's one of those things where you're like, okay, like what exactly are we doing? You know? But I will say, like as a whole, great plus, too amazing, arguably amazing plus, and I think that's where I'm gonna leave it to with my thoughts so far on Chainsaw Man Part Two. So overall, as a whole, like I said, like great plus to amazing plus. That's kind of where I want to put my rating scale between great plus and amazing plus. And with that being said, you guys, that is pretty much all I gotta say for this discussion on Chainsaw Man Part Two. I cannot believe we like almost reached the hour mark, but it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun talking about Chainsaw Man Part 2. And you better believe when 145 drops tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about it. So I will catch you guys on the flip side for 145. So catch you later, guys, and have an awesome day. Peace.